So that's what I'm going to talk about, but just a little bit of more background on me. Prior to my role as at Vector Institute, my undergraduate, I studied math and computer science at McGill University in Canada. I worked at what's now Accenture. Then I did a master's at MIT, focusing on good old-fashioned AI in the clinical decision-making group. Ended up then working in a number of startups. So I got involved, left the PhD program at MIT to start an internet company in the 90s, Seabridge, focused on B2B internet. Worked with a research team at Xerox PARC on a new programming technology aspect-oriented programming. Got into the field of machine learning, with a company called QuantCast that was early in that space around helping to advertise based on understanding audiences on the internet. Started a company, Think Big Analytics, to help enterprises with machine learning and data. We were acquired by Teradata, where I led it as a business unit, and we expanded internationally. And then left to join Google Cloud CTO office, focusing on applied AI. In the last few years, I've had an increasing emphasis on the topic that's here, which is responsible AI. I think through my career as an entrepreneur, I've always been quite a techno-optimist, thinking about how technology can really help society and the world. And I think it has done those things, but I've become more aware of the risks and some of the challenges. Both, I do think about long-term, what are the risks as we create more and more powerful AI? And I think we are seeing, as I'll talk about today, some of the near-term challenges. And I would argue that there's a connection between long-term threats to AI safety and near-term threats from use of AI in an irresponsible way, which isn't always deliberate, but can be simply willful ignorance or lack of consideration. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'm happy to answer questions about anything. I have to give the editorial of, in sharing my career, I emphasize the successes, but there have been some unsuccessful things I tried as an entrepreneur, and I didn't talk about those, but that's because we never tend to, but they were there, right? So don't think that just because I've had some success, like selling a company and being a co-founder of a company that went public, that I didn't also have some absolute failures and disappointing startups too, because those were in buried away that we tend not to talk about when we summarize our career, but they were there. So with that, let me talk a little bit about responsible AI and then leave some time at the end for questions. So in addition to Vector Institute, where I'm building an engineering team to complement the great research to magnify the impact and get feedback, as well as support the researchers, I also have a role as the engineering lead at Schwartz Reisman, which is an institute at U of T, University of Toronto, focused on technology and society. And that's great because it's interdisciplinary cooperation, not just computer experts, technologists, but also legal, political science, economics, philosophy, people with different disciplines around thinking about the impact of technology on society. So in my talk today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the opportunity that I see in AI, some of how it's going to have a real positive impact, some of the harms that are occurring today in society because of AI and issues with it, and thoughts on how to be responsible. So, the last decade was really one of deep learning, deep neural networks coming into their own and essentially producing models that allowed AI systems to solve problems that weren't solvable in a satisfactory way before. Recent example, a lot of people have been captivated by GPT-3 as a breakthrough, massive scale natural language processing model using deep learning and significant resources, and the promise of few shot learning that, you have a model that has learned enough English language that you can actually give it instructions in English with examples, and it will actually, at least for some tasks, do reasonably well. In a few cases, even exceeding state of the art, right? So summarization, composing text, very interesting results. Surprising emergent behavior from large deep learning model using a transformer architecture. Likewise, we've seen, advances in domains like robotics, of course, smart speakers, and lots of advances, in terms of digital natives, companies like Google and Facebook and Apple, but also healthcare, an area where at Vector Institute, we're doing a lot of work, whether it be like helping do a better job with radiology and other medical images to help get diagnoses right, identify things like whether a tick might be carrying Lyme disease. It can be a long-term disability, point of care, like predicting cardiac arrest just a few minutes before one might happen can have a dramatic impact on survivability, right? These are all kinds of healthcare projects. And there's others, right? There's interesting work on using AI techniques to do things like address climate change and improve energy efficiency as well. So there's lots of different applications of AI that can have positive impacts on society and, as well as be great businesses. And I think as entrepreneurs, you probably don't want to be thinking about AI as a business in and of itself so much as how data and artificial intelligence can be enablers of new businesses, because it is continuing to create a lot of value. But I think it's important to also think about some of the downsides, some of the risks and harms happening in society because of AI. So one category is bias in algorithms, discrimination. So that can be disparate performance. We probably some of you noticed last year when Apple got investigated because of gender discrimination for their credit card, co-branded, that provided by Goldman Sachs. And there's lots of examples of this, of biased outcomes in machine learning algorithms. Another example, GPT-3 is powerful, but it's trained on a large corpus of data across the internet. And so it's not surprising that it's also learned harmful things, right? So, it will produce offensive completions. There's also been research showing how it can be few shot trained to write extremist dialogues from things like QAnon. So there's bias, and it's learned from biased input, and hasn't, while there's been some efforts to control for this, it certainly hasn't solved the problem, right? So bias is one area, but not the only one. There's other areas of social harm, right? So I would argue, if you haven't seen The Social Dilemma, it's a great movie about this, but I think what often people don't appreciate is how much of our information ecosystem is now mediated by AI algorithms, right? When you do a search, you're getting search results that are ranked by an AI algorithm, personalized to you, right? When you're seeing a news feed on a social media site, it's being ranked based on an algorithm around what you would likely find interesting. And so, looking at disinformation, polarization, conspiracy theories, filter bubbles, right? These things are being very much, they're not just a function of AI, they're also a function of design choices. And like any technology is being deployed, ultimately, the business behind them is responsible. But, there's big externalities, right? Big consequences for society from these things that are not necessarily reflected in the law, and they're not necessarily reflected in the incentives that the companies behind them have. In a similar way, there's also applications of AI to troubling uses in authoritarian states, right? So China notably has been pushing forward with a social credit system, combined with mass surveillance to give people benefits if they're compliant, and if they're deemed to be not following good policies like lazy or video gaming too much, they may be denied access to transportation or other capabilities. It's inspired a Black Mirror episode. I think it's called Nosedive. But so we're seeing AI systems, whether through ignoring broader consequences or deliberate application to dubious uses, creating a lot of harms. And these are just some examples, of areas where AI can have a negative impact on society. So how can we think about responsibility in this context? I think organizations need to have a strategy around ethics and taking responsibility. They need to have a process of governing and inclusion to have diverse voices. I also think in this process, it's super important to think about automation. And this is an area that perhaps as entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, you can contribute, is too much of the governance and process today is heavyweight. So before DevOps became popular, the way of thinking about quality in software was high overhead, occasional, manual inspection and release, which didn't scale well and didn't actually work that well. So we're desperately in need of more innovation in terms of automation and standards to ensure better outcomes instead of relying on lots of manual review and documentation, which unfortunately is far too much the state of the art. And the technology underlying it, not only standards, but having good tools, but also I think responsibility by design, right? I think way too often the way people are thinking about responsibility, avoiding bad outcomes in AI systems is somewhat simplistic objectives, build a system, then get it working with a real focus on just getting a core metric right. And then think about afterwards, like what might go wrong and how do I correct for it? Sometimes only once it's a big problem in production. And we really need to tilt that on its head and think about what might go wrong and how can we avoid problems proactively. So I'd argue that it's increasingly critical, right, for organizations to get it right with cross-functional support, leadership in organizations, not just the technical experts, regulators, researchers, government. We need to have involvement in this by all fronts, right? Certainly it's an area that I'm excited to contribute at Vector and Schwartz Reisman, but I think all of us have a role as entrepreneurs who can think about how to make this better can play a big role too. So I would say, in thinking about acting on responsibility, organizations of all sizes need to take responsibility and think about the aspects of strategy, process, and technology, broaden the participation from different stakeholders, think a lot about transparency and really understanding consequences. And too often in the machine learning domain, people spend a lot of time thinking about the inputs and how to get good results, and they spend too little time thinking about the outcomes. Thinking about more than one way of measuring what's happening, think about what might go wrong and how to detect it early on, and think about more nuanced metrics, right? There's a important adage that when you optimize for a single variable, it will tend to drive other independent variables to extreme values. So you can't assume that by optimizing something like attention, you're going to stay in a normal operating range. You'll tend to get extreme values, like extremely inflammatory content will engage people more. So those are some quick thoughts, but I wanted to make sure to leave time here at the end for your questions. So thank you for attending the talk, and happy to answer your questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. That was really good. Thank you. That was really informative. And yeah, I think there's the growing field of AI and ML and NLP, like you said, is just really fascinating to see how it's being implemented in a lot of these companies. Awesome. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or to unmute yourself and go for it.
All right. Looks like we have a question from Eric. Let's see. What is the main purpose and work of the Vector Institute? So the Vector Institute is a leading AI research nonprofit, not for profit. It's funded by the Canadian government, the province of Ontario, and private industry sponsors. Really the mission is to advance AI in a beneficial way, to help foster economic development in Canada, to help create great research that benefits the world. And in collaboration with Schwartz Reisman, we very much look at how do we influence policy in a way that will create positive outcomes aligned with the discussion here. So you can definitely read more about Vector. It's been created by some of the luminaries in the field, and I think there's some fantastic research coming out of the Vector Institute and affiliates. So that's the main purpose. The work is diverse research with lots of emphasis on applications in industry and healthcare as well. So that was the first question. Let's see. The next question in order: how did I get into MIT? Well, I applied. I had done my undergraduate, and I had studied math and computer science, and had done well and had some great recommendations. And I was able to get in. I would say MIT was certainly an elite institution and selective, but it was 1992, just to date myself a little bit. So a little while ago, actually 1991 when I was admitted, 92 when I got my master's. So that was the quick quick answer to that one. Caleb, thanks from Fahim. Caleb asks, are there solutions to AI creating polarization or any ways around it? And it's a good question. There's some good research. I think there's a number of promising angles around it, right? So there's a number of people who look at questions, like including Rich Zemmel has done collaborations looking at questions like, can you come up with recommendation systems that have more diversity of output that tend not to condense into filter bubbles, into isolation? And you know, Rich leads research at the Vector Institute, but there are others who have published in that vein, right? I think there's also interesting ways of thinking about how do you set objective functions to encourage more diversity of perspective. I saw some interesting work, I believe it was done out of Stanford, where they were able to train language models to identify a different kind of bias, not discrimination against specific groups, but instead bias in terms of language that was not neutral, but was highly opinionated, right? And they basically looked at Wikipedia edits as training corpus to say, like, what kinds of things are being flagged as, you know, inflammatory opinions. In a similar way, there's interesting AI work from a part of the Google parent company Alphabet, Jigsaw, the Perspective API, which provides is a model to identify toxic or offensive commentary, right? So I think there's a lot of ways that you can measure and identify some of this. And indeed, if you look at some of the discussion of what YouTube has done, you know, in addressing responsibility in the content recommendations, they've talked about identifying borderline content that's not quite violating their terms of service, but is pretty close, and not boosting it through recommendations. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done, right? But I also think, you know, just as important as the incentive structure, like I think the root cause of a lot of this is, as long as it's more of a reaction, specific problems come up and it's a game of whack-a-mole, the company's like, oh, we better fix this specific thing. But, you know, how do we get to an economic structure, an incentive structure in society that there's a motivation to do the right things, right? I think that we've seen in spades in the last few days with some of the pressure from different political actors in the US about, you know, what to do around problematic speech in the middle of a presidential election. One of the challenges is, you know, editorial is nuanced and complicated. And, you know, if you have oligopolies that are increasingly mediating everyone's consumption of information, there isn't a single right answer, right? There's no right answer for what 3 editors should do for all news, right? Instead, I think it's super important to have the preservation of choice, right? To have a way that you can have multiple ways of looking at information, right? So I like things like the Access Act. That's a bill that's before Congress and the US bipartisan support that says you need to have access to large social networks so that consumers can have choice of different ways of looking at information. So let's see, that was Caleb's question, thank you. Alexander asks, I mentioned the Social Dilemma documentary. Do I think there's a fair chance that big tech companies will do more to shift to more humane business models? I think, again, this is one where some progress is happening, but I think it's going to be important to have, you know, more policy emphasis, you know, more regulation, as well as more feasibility, more demonstration of what can be done. You know, I think one of the things that also would be really good is, I like the vision of Web 3.0 and having a more decentralized internet, and not having an internet that fundamentally centralizes information, that tends to centralize power and trust. So I think moving to more decentralized architectures is interesting. And you know, because of that, I think some of the work around federated learning and, you know, even projects like OpenMind PySift that are about, you know, creating inherently decentralized machine learning are really interesting. So I think there's a lot of angles to this, but I think, you know, fundamentally as citizens, you know, we have to speak up, and I don't think that self-regulation will get us where we need to be in terms of addressing humane business models. So let's see, Arigs asks, what branches do I think AI has potential in? For example, AI is well founded in medical research and what other subjects. And, it's interesting. I think AI is being applied in quite a wide variety of domains, right? I mean, there's applications in many industries, right? Lots of applications clearly around media and entertainment and gaming. There's lots of applications around consumer applications, clearly lots of applications in retail, lots of uses in business to business, right? There's lots of companies that are doing forms processing, document processing, that are using robotic process automation and doing more automation to understand and respond to content, automating more around workflow, a lot of interest around contact center and making it easier to interact for basic needs for different people in a business process. I would just say, if maybe think about entrepreneurs, it's an article from 5 years ago that Andreessen Horowitz wrote about full stack startups. But I think in many cases, companies coming into industries and saying, how do we make a change for the better, are applying AI along with a full stack control of software to make it come alive. You could look at examples like Oscar Healthcare in the healthcare system in the US, where they rebuilt operational systems to enable AI, is just an example of that kind of company. And so lots of great questions, but I also want to be respectful of the time. I know we've got Shopify coming up next, and I think I'm just coming up here at the top of the hour. So thank you all for your time, and I will yield the floor.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. Yeah, so there are a few other questions that are left over. Would it be possible to perhaps relay them over to you at some point and perhaps get your input in the future?
Yeah, certainly. Feel free to send by email, and maybe I can follow up offline.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Ron. That was a phenomenal presentation. Awesome. And perfect. So now let's go back to our handy dandy slide, and perfect. So I see that Adrienne has joined the Zoom, and so has Tim. So hello, Adrienne. Hello, Tim. How's it going?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having us on today.
Yeah, for sure. It's our pleasure. Yeah, once again, just thank you so much for joining us today. It means a lot that you're able to provide your stories and experiences to our eager high school students.
My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having us.
For sure. Awesome. So if you guys would like to share your screen and present your keynote, please feel free to go for it.
Okay, great. Keynote. I love it. Okay, I'm just going to fiddle around with some screens for a minute, so bear with me.
Yeah, just to introduce Tim and Adrienne once again for the people that joined late. They're both from Shopify and work within the partnerships division. So yeah, it's going to be a very exciting presentation.
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how I can share just one tab versus two.
Good to meet you guys. If anyone calls us Spotify, get that all the time.
Okay, what do we have here?
We see partnerships at technology companies.
Wonderful. When I go here, are you seeing the green slide or are you seeing speaker notes?
We see your
notes.
You're seeing speaker notes. Okay. We'll figure this out, guys. 1 second here.
Yeah, now we just see your green slide.
Okay, cool. Hello. Thanks for having us on. We learned a little bit about your organization and what you're doing here, just as we were chatting to the team and Dennis about coming on to speak today, and just really awesome to see a group of young people who are so motivated. And half the questions that were coming in for that AI chat, I was like, oh shoot, okay, these people know what they're talking about. So thanks for having us on today. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about partnerships in general. So I have been in partnerships for quite some time. So I'm just going to give you kind of an overview about what partnerships means, because it's a very, very vague term, especially in the technology industry. So we'll go through that, talk a little bit about partnerships at Shopify as well. And then Tim will be able to dive a little bit more into the Shopify platform and what our company in particular is doing in the market. So let's take it away. So before I dive in too much to the what is partnership side of things, who are we? I'll let Tim introduce himself, but I'm Adrienne Coburn. So I'm a strategic partnerships manager here at Shopify. So I work with a group of our partners called our agency partners or service partners who are going out there on behalf of our organization and selling our product and servicing our product to merchants. So that's my role at Shopify, but it's been kind of a journey to get there in this specific role. So I went to Laurier for business, kind of graduated Laurier and had no idea as to what business meant or where I wanted to go within that field. It's a very large field, as I'm sure you know. So my first job was really just one that I could get. I kind of took the job that came to me, and what that was selling volunteer travel at a not-for-profit organization. So it was in a sales development capacity, speaking to individuals about the different travel excursions that we had. So getting those sales skills led me to go to a partner organization of theirs to be able to be the partnership manager between two organizations, this charity and the travel company that I moved towards. After working there at the travel company as a partnership manager for a couple of years, a friend of mine was working at a local Toronto tech startup called Uberflip, who does B2B marketing software. So he reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking to start up a partnership organization at Uberflip, and we would love for you to come on board and try to figure it out for us. So that was what I did. This was about probably 5 years ago now. Went to Uberflip to figure out what partnerships meant to them at a growing startup and where it could really enhance their brand message. Fun fact, Tim and I actually worked together at Uberflip, which I'm sure he can speak to a little bit as well. We found our way back working together here at Shopify again. So then I moved to Shopify, worked at Uberflip for a few years, built their partnership program, and about a year ago, I moved over to Shopify to work on the team that I'm now on, which is the partnerships organization. So that's just some background on me, but I'll dive a little bit into partnerships. So before we go specifically to what different types of partnerships can mean, one thing to point out is the term partner ecosystem. So let's take a look at really understanding this definition about what a partnership ecosystem is. So an ecosystem can be described as an entire network of businesses. So it can be existing within a single vertical or across all verticals that are actively and publicly engaged in partnerships with at least one of the other companies within that ecosystem. The visual to the left here, the kind of scatter graph, is an outline of the e-commerce ecosystem, which is the ecosystem that Shopify is in. I'm going to say the word ecosystem about 500 times and we'll all get sick of it, but just bear with me. So the ecosystem is made up of thousands of partners that are all connected in one way or another. So visual mapping of the e-commerce ecosystem displays all existing partnerships within the vertical and draws correlations among their direct or indirect relationships or adjacent to the partner's ecosystem. Basically, it's just one big web of connectors and a whole lot of opportunity for these organizations that are within this map to be able to work within each other to build their networks. So when we talk about a partner ecosystem, it's within the greater ecosystem, we're referring to a single company's partner network. You can see this in the diagram to the right here. So this is Shopify's partner ecosystem and has thousands of partners within that network. Many of Shopify's partners have also partnered with each other. These connections create a sticky network and tight-knit partner ecosystem. Because Shopify has partnered with so many companies that complement the functionality of its platform, Shopify has become stickier in its technology. In the B2B world, meaning many vendors look to Shopify as the preferred e-commerce marketplace because of the company's seamless integrations with products or services they love. So really making us a part of everything else that's going on. As our partnership count grows, it influences the greater ecosystem and the market grows too. Shopify's partner team, us, has created a massive ecosystem that increases the brand's stickiness and expands our market reach. So if you've ever heard of the term like rising tide lifts all boats or something to that effect, that's effectively what we're doing here with a partner ecosystem. If one company is improving what they're doing, if one company is growing the market, then the next company beside it that's connected into it will also improve, and our success really depends on each other. So this way of forming ecosystems you'll see with like Microsoft and Salesforce and Amazon, all these big companies don't exist in isolation. They exist because there's thousands of products and services surrounding them that also exist. So why are partner ecosystems so important? Partner ecosystems are created for really two major reasons. One, no one company can expect to control a customer's entire technology stack. No one company can solve all of customers' problems. And so that's kind of the one side of it. And then the second side is that no one company can realistically reach all of these potential customers. So it's kind of twofold. It's being able to fulfill all technology needs that a customer might have. And second, being able to reach every possible customer that is out there is just not a realistic and feasible thing for one individual company to do. So that's why these ecosystems have come to exist. So partner ecosystem development has become a critical way to leverage competitive advantage and drive growth. A couple main reasons or ways. So one, increasing market power and visibility. Two, accessing new markets and new business opportunities by expanding reach into other areas. Three, innovation via new technology or services acquisition. And four, improving stickiness. So stickiness meaning it makes it harder to pull your product from a tech stack if you're a part of one of these ecosystems with multiple players involved. So within these ecosystems, there's dozens and dozens of types of partners. So I'll go through some of the major ones here, but lots of exploration we could do. The reason why it's important to understand this is because, I'm doing one type of partnerships at Shopify, but that doesn't mean that's the only career path. There are dozens of ways that you can kind of take this and spin it for your own interests. So if you look at the ecosystems we just talked about, they're made up of dozens of different partner types. While some partnership types and categories may be interchangeable, depending on who you're speaking with, partnerships are generally grouped into, let's call it 3 groups. So one is channel sales partnerships. So channel partnerships have a goal of finding new customers and generating revenue through partner sales efforts. So basically getting other people to sell and service your product on behalf of your organization. So a couple subtypes within that type. One would be a reseller. So partners who are authorized to sell your platform on your behalf of the organization instead of having an internal sales team do it. So in the consumer world, in your day-to-day, what this might be, an example of this might be like Best Buy selling an iPhone versus you buying it directly through the Apple Store. So same thing applies for SaaS technology. Being able to have an organization pitch Shopify on our behalf allows us to scale our marketing and sales efforts instead of just hiring on sales staff after sales staff. The second group under the channel sales approach is managed service partners. So these are partners who service the platform on behalf of you. So instead of having internal customer support teams, having partners go out and service the customers that are coming to your platforms. That could be like launching them, integrating them into the different technologies that they're using, etc. And the next one here is system integrators. So these are partners who integrate your software into the rest of the ecosystem. So that mad map that I showed you, there are people out there who have developed their services about plugging all of those into each other to make sure it's seamless, because they are different technologies at the end of the day. The second grouping here is technology partnerships. So one grouping, a subgrouping underneath technology partnerships are what you'll hear called ISVs, or independent software vendors. So these are complementary technologies that integrate into your product. It could be simple, like an app store where you're downloading an app on your iPhone, for example, or it could be a highly integrated solution where it's a part of what you're buying, something like Google Home and Spotify, for example. The other area underneath technology partnerships is something that's called OEM. I don't even know what the acronym stands for, to be honest. So let's call it OEM. Technologies that are embedded into your platform and sold as one. So this would be like the hardware on your iPhone being made up of dozens of different technologies, but being sold as one. So lots of technology platforms that are out there, instead of building all of this on their own, what they're doing is simply taking bits and features like analytics platforms and embedding it into their own platform and then selling it as one in kind of a white labeled approach. The last grouping of partnerships is kind of broadly marketing partnerships. So one type of marketing partnership could be a referral partner. So these are, influencers that influence your business by referring you new business to your category. So this could be like your classic Instagram influencer, you always see like partnered with. This happens in the technology world as well, where there's influencers where they might be consultants who are like going out there and looking at people's business and assessing what they need to change. Or it could be people with like YouTube channels about like how to get online quick, like that kind of stuff. And then the last category here is brand partnerships. So partners who do marketing together for market exposure. So they might not actually be selling anything. They might not even be officially integrated together in any capacity, but they're trying to approach the market with one brand message. So a consumer example here would be something like GoPro and Red Bull. There's not actually a product that they're selling, but they're kind of selling that idea because they're addressing a similar market together. So they want to be seen together. So what does this translate to at a place like Shopify? So Shopify has a massive partner ecosystem. We have thousands and thousands, like 50,000 partners that are in our ecosystem. And those partners have developed their own partner programs. So it really is truly a deeply embedded and a massive ecosystem. So some of the main categories that we see here, one are our service partners. So our service partners are people that are actually taking the platform and getting it live for the merchants that we're working with. They have like design and development skills, marketing skills. Some of these people are individual freelancers where, you guys could be a Shopify partner where you're building Shopify stores in your spare time, or even as a full-time career once you're at that point. Or we have full-blown agencies who are doing this with hundreds of staff, being able to get all of our merchants live and on their stores. We have partners that are resellers. So we don't actually have an internal sales team for Shopify Core. We do have one for our enterprise product, but for our main business, we don't actually have a sales team. So we have partners that are going to market and really pushing on our behalf to get these merchants online and quickly, especially right now. And then we have partners that do things like custom app development and custom theme development, where they're making the platform what the individual merchant actually wants. So what Shopify is doing is developing a platform that's kind of more or less one size fits all. That's doesn't sound very positive, but what our strategy is build a platform that works for most people most of the time. And that we have our partners come in on top of that and make it what they want it specific for them. The second grouping is our app developers. So we have an app marketplace with thousands of apps where partners or merchants can come in and download an app and integrate it into their store. Once again, things that we're not prepared to build into our platform, but we know that the merchants need. The third group is our affiliates. So we have a group of partners that are influencers within the e-commerce space. So they might have a podcast, they might run educational webinars, but people who are referring us business, they're not getting deeply ingrained to the platform, but they have like referral links in which they can push business towards us. And then our fourth bucket is a big one in strategic alliances. So we have some very deeply embedded technology partnerships with our platform. So people like Google and Facebook and Instagram, where the partnerships are more than an app marketplace where it's simply a download. They're deeply embedded where we have to have strategies together, go-to-market plans, full teams that are really making these things come to life. So before I kind of wrap up partnerships and pass it off to Tim to talk a little bit more about Shopify, just want to talk a little bit about careers and partnerships. So there's a million different things you can do. Basically any technology career path you can pick could have a partner influence at some time, but there's kind of three main tracks as I see it. So one is more channel sales and partner management. So this is that selling to and selling through partners. So the skill set here would be more of a sales skill set, account management, really being able to convince people about why they should partner with you and why it's going to bring value to their business and getting them to sell on your behalf. So much more of a sales mindset. The second grouping is technology partner management. So this is more of a technical mindset. So typically a technical partner management role would be, if there's those OEMs that I was talking about, or the independent software vendors who are trying to integrate into your platform, you need to know both platforms inside and out. You have to have a deep understanding of API and how you can make these different organizations work together through their API connectors. So a little bit more of a technical role mixed with that account management as well. And then the last bit is more of the program and marketing approach. So these people might be, the two first ones might be working individually with different partners, where this last grouping is really looking at the strategy about how you want to go to market. So more of that marketing style approach, kind of the one-to-many, getting out there, getting in front of partners, and more broad strokes. Awesome. So that's kind of my spiel. Tim, I will pass this off to you here. I'll just stop sharing.
Cool. All right, so I'm going to talk just a little bit more high level, and thanks for the partnerships intro there, Adrienne, but I'm going to talk a little bit more high level about Shopify in general, sort of high level view of what we're all about, what the company is trying to do, sort of long term, just to give you guys a bit more context. As Adrienne mentioned, her and I used to work together at our previous company, and then just accidentally sort of bumped into each other again here. What I do is I lead the City of Toronto community efforts here at Shopify. And so community and local community really means a bunch of things. And so what my day-to-day looks like is a little bit of stuff like this, working with youth groups, working with external organizations, as well as working with strategic partnerships that will run programs that are mutually beneficial for Shopify and our partners. So for instance, right now, we're running a program with the City of Toronto, as well as the federal government, in order to get more businesses, brick and mortar stores online, get their stores built for them, get them launched online to help them through COVID, and so that they can still serve their customers. So things like that, a little bit of a diverse role, some partnership stuff, some planning stuff, and then also just working directly with merchants and groups such as yourselves. Anyway, a little bit about Shopify. Everyone, of course, knows that Shopify is about e-commerce, and that's really our bread and butter. Although we are spreading more into the offline world, we have our own POS, that's point of sale system, as well as we're starting to get into some physical retail spaces. But still, bread and butter is e-commerce. It's sort of what we built the company off of. Fun fact, Q3 of 2020 compared to Q3 of 2019, e-commerce sales are up 44% in 1 year. So that is a huge dramatic jump. No surprise there, because of COVID, online spending went way up. So it's not something that's going to go away. And it's something that we expect will only continue to accelerate. Speaking of e-commerce, maybe I'll tell you guys a little bit of a story. So Shopify is a Canadian company. The headquarters are in Ottawa. Adrienne and I are in Toronto. But the way the company actually started, our founder is this German guy by the name of Toby Lutke. And he moved over from Germany, I think something like 2003, 2004, tried to get a job, couldn't get a job, right? So he had graduated school, graduated his internships, had a background in computer engineering, computer science, came to Canada from Germany, couldn't get a job. So he said, okay, if no one will hire me, I'm gonna have to sell something, right? I'm gonna have to start my own business. And he thought, you know what do I want to sell? What am I really passionate about? And he's like, I've got it, snowboarding. I love snowboarding. So he actually started a snowboarding company, manufactured snowboards, and got them ready to sell. He goes to sell them online. He says, okay, how do I make a website so I can sell my stuff online? Remember, this is like 2004, early days of internet commerce. So he's like, how do I sell this online? And realized that there wasn't any tool that could help him do it. So he had to go and build it all from scratch. So luckily, he is a computer engineer, computer programmer by trade. So built the site from scratch, coding everything, front end, back end, what the customer sees, what you need in the backside in order to manage a business. We're talking customer records, inventory, products, all that stuff. Even having to build things like checkout credit card processing. None of that stuff existed. There's no easy way to get it. And so he had to build it all by scratch. So you probably see where I'm going with this. About a year into it, he's finally completed the first initial build, and thinks to himself, you know what, this thing that I've built, the software package platform that I've built in order to sell my snowboards, I bet you people would think that this is a valuable product, maybe even more than snowboards. So today, that original snowboard store is still open. It's online. You can Google it. It's called Snow Devil. But he was right in that the platform and the software itself ended up being much more useful and valuable to people than his snowboards. So Shopify, that all that is to say, came from a place of entrepreneurship, small business, and being a tool that enables someone to create a business and really set themselves up and set their future up for success. So today, we're all over the place. We have enterprise. We have our own network of warehousing, operations, fulfillment. But really at the core of it, where we started from and what we still feel strongly about is that small business entrepreneurs helping people start their businesses and strive towards financial freedom. So that's a little bit of a background spiel about Shopify. It is a platform, which really in the sense of the term just means that, like Adrienne said, we try to be most things for most people. And so you should be able to go and start a business really easily with our platform and have all of the stuff handled, all the stuff that you don't want to handle, handled already for you. So the hosting, the servers, all that stuff, the checkout, the payments, all of that stuff should be included so you can focus on your brand, your business, your marketing, and your product. That is an overview into what Shopify really does and what we aim to do. But yeah, like Adrienne said, it's now just this kind of wide-ranging platform ecosystem. We have a lot of different types of partners that Adrienne works with on a daily basis. We have a lot of community and sort of business relation teams like myself that work with different groups in the cities that we operate in. And then just to have our hand in many different pots. So happy to answer any questions, but hope that gives you guys a good overview into what we're all about.
Yeah, for sure. That was Adrienne and Tim, that was really cool. Honestly, I knew that Shopify was an e-commerce platform, and all I know about Shopify is their stock is incredibly attractive. But it was very cool to hear about the partnerships. In fact, I never even thought of partnerships was so deeply knit together. But I have one question to possibly kick off the call. So as we've seen with the pandemic, you mentioned, Tim, e-commerce has pretty much skyrocketed especially in the past quarter. How have partnerships at both a micro and macro level sort of, democratized the access of, building an e-commerce platform for, many of these small businesses, brick and mortar stores in places like Toronto?
So is the question, how have partnerships evolved or changed due to COVID? Or I'm not sure I fully understand the questions.
Yeah, like how have they made it easier for these smaller businesses to come together in one very common place very easily?
Okay. So I think the word partners and partnerships is really, it covers a lot of ground, right? It's a bit of a blanket statement. Adrienne works with partners that are specific, but then I work with partners who run programs with us. But the word partnerships really spans quite a lot of things. To answer your question about how or if or has it helped more small businesses get online, this idea of partnerships, I can speak to the idea that running partnerships between Shopify and organizations in order to bring businesses together and help them get online has been really, really successful during the pandemic. As you guys might know, many businesses belong to business associations, right? Just like clubs, like you guys are students, you belong to a student club, right? and there's like 40 something of you guys here tonight, you come together to put on things like this and to network with each other and to help each other out. Businesses often belong to a business association. There are thousands of these all over, probably all over the country, but there are many business associations where they come together. And when we partner with these business associations, the nice thing is that we can do things like bring presentations to them. We can do things like bring services to them so that they can, for instance, get help with building their stores, get help with their business, get help with launching their e-commerce presence. So in that way, I think partnerships have been incredibly valuable to the members that belong to those business associations. Just because you belong to a club or a group or something, that gives you access and help to launch your business.
Awesome, thank you. So there are some questions in the chat. I would like to, talk on behalf of them. So basically, one person asked, say, and this is for Adrienne specifically, say one company that you partnered with, unfortunately, declares bankruptcy. How do you guys have a magic calculation that predicts how much this impacts your web or your broader ecosystem?
Yeah, there's definitely no magic equations in partnerships at all, just because of the complexities. So, that one partner, it is not a defined impact, which I think, is different than a lot of technology that's out there. Usually there's some sort of correlation. If X happens, Y will happen. But in partnerships, just because there's so many different layers, it's not the direct attribution that you might see there. However, the more that you automate the way that you work with partnerships and really put in place those attribution channels, you can do this more and more. So for example, because Shopify has such partnerships at scale, all of our partnerships are very quantifiable. So everything is measured. Everything goes through technology platforms in order to kind of gauge success. So if one of our app partners, for instance, goes under, you are able to see what influence you're losing in terms of the number of referrals, the kind of, you can run equations about like customer value, if customer value is going down after that. But it's a weak attribution, it's a weak correlation to be able to nail it down to that one single thing happening, just because it's such a complicated ecosystem. So in short, no, there's definitely no magic calculation.
Awesome, thank you. Someone else asked, I think I might want to rephrase this a little bit. Like, when two companies partner together, like for example, as you mentioned, as I saw Tim, I almost said Spotify there. I'm so sorry. I mean to say Shopify and Stripe. The payments process. Like, what happens from a corporate point of view or even a consumer point of view?
Yeah, so 95% of the time, no, there would be no sort of shares or anything like that, or ownership over companies. You're getting more into the mergers and acquisition, kind of the corporate partnerships, but merger and acquisition as you start to look at that. However, there are agreements that are out there. When you remember those type of technology partnerships I talked about, OEM, where it's like very highly integrated tech partnerships, there are agreements that start to look into that, but it's definitely not commonplace. Yeah, definitely more mergers and acquisitions, but where you see that is if it's a smaller company where they're kind of going to the bigger company for investment almost. So there's like incubators, that type of thing. So you might see that kind of thing come up there, but not necessarily in a typical partnership agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, go for it, Tim. Sorry.
Yeah, I would just say it's like it has to be mutually beneficial. That's probably like the main term I would use.
Yeah.
Any partnerships, just you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's the sort of idea. And so no share ownership or anything like that typically, but it's just, are we doing something together that helps get you more customers and get me more customers? And if so, then great. Let's partner together.
Got it. Awesome. And this is for both of you. What motivated you to, work at Shopify, during your career paths?
I mean, it's a rocket ship. It's one of, in terms of Canada, especially, it's kind of this golden child in the tech ecosystem in Canada. Is very unique in its size. It's very unique in its growth trajectory. There's not a lot of companies out there that kind of fall into that middle bucket. You have the Amazons of the world, and you have your startups. There's just this unique stage that Shopify is at, where we have huge market dominance and a lot of great people on board, a lot of resources and an ability for us to grow quickly. It's rare. So yeah, just kind of a no-brainer to join the rocket ship. The other thing is, at a place like Shopify, you can do so many different roles. You could spend your entire career here and change roles every few years to experience something new, where at a smaller organization, you might, in your specific role, be touching a lot of different areas, but there's just not the career growth trajectory. So that was a big aspect for me as well.
Yeah, plus one to what Adrienne said. And also for me, I just wanted to learn more about e-commerce because I thought that was such a cool field and something that's not going away. So a few years ago, I was like, you know what, that's probably something that's going to be here to stay. I would like to learn more about it and just get immersed into it. And then honestly, I accidentally just ran into some people that worked at Shopify in an event, and maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. But yeah, about 4 years ago, and that's the first time I'd heard of Shopify, and that's it. Sometimes you just, I don't know, you just like bump into somebody and then learn a little bit more. And so, I mean, yeah, I encourage you guys to keep on doing this kind of thing, and continuing to just meet people and get exposure to different companies and different industries.
For sure. That's really, it's a really unique story. Like, sometimes very unconventional, off-beaten paths can take us to a very interesting place. And for that last question for today for you guys, is, does Shopify offer any enrichment programs for high schoolers or university students? We are aware there's a dev degree program, which is integrated with York, and I think it's Carleton, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, do you know of any other programs that are available?
I would say one good resource to check out is that we do have a lot of educational content and courses on shopifycompass.com. That's something to check out. In terms of enrichment, you can certainly enrich your awareness and education on e-commerce. So that's a very good start. Yeah, Adrienne, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good, Tim.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure to learn from you both. We hope to have you back sometime in the future, and wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thanks, everyone. Really great to meet you all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
See you, Tim. Awesome. So that was amazing. So I hope you guys all enjoyed those two presentations. We are just going to quickly cover one last little slide, and then we are going to wrap it up for tonight. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I definitely had a lot of fun. Awesome. So now that that's done, what is case 2 going to look like? Well, this is the case 2 kickoff event, so we should probably cover that. As you guys know, for case 1, it involved working with data and understanding how to get data from the internet and how to do some critical thinking to identify some basic trends and compare that with the current news that we can see. Now, we're going to specifically use whatever we learned in the previous case and hone in into the restaurant industry. And what I mean by that is we're going to look at data from the past and compare it with news that we have once again. And this is very specific to the restaurant industry, like I said. And we're going to try to find out essentially how the restaurant industry is being affected at this point in time of our lives. So yeah, the guiding question is why? Why are these restaurants being affected so, why are they being affected so badly? Like, why are some restaurants, on the other side doing so well in comparison to other restaurants? I want to give you guys a quick example. Oh, sorry. Before we go to that, we're going to figure out some of this stuff by using data analytics. And we're going to teach you some of the basic data analytic analysis methods. And we're going to kick you off with some, very basic exercises to break down some of the very hard concepts that are used in the data science field, just to lay a foundation and help you guys to help you guys build the exposure to data analytics to find these trends and compare them with the current news. Awesome. So now to my example. So do you guys know where this is? You guys can raise your hand and mute yourself. This is one of the rush hour times in Toronto. This is right in front of Union Station, and I'm sure some of you guys might have noticed it. Maybe you guys did take your kid to work day a couple years ago. Maybe you guys noticed, but this is what Toronto looks like in a very bustling, very crowded area on Bay Street in the core of the financial district. And what was a very lucrative area to be in, at least before the pandemic, is not so lucrative anymore. With the pandemic, we've seen total changes in how people are, reacting to the situation. People aren't going into work anymore. Before, everyone was going to work. So all these businesses have the access to, at least, attract some of these people that are, commuting on a day-to-day basis. The financial district is built on top of a very intricate path system in Toronto, and a very metropolitan, area has now become into a very, ghost-like city. So all these businesses that would have existed in the Toronto path and, in the financial district, in the heart of the financial district, are now facing questions as to, is it really a lucrative space to be in such in what was a very densely packed area? As now, there's nobody there, as we can see through this picture. And is it such a lucrative field anymore? A lot of these, restaurants, if you walk in the path, are, facing a lot of risk. Are they going to be able to sustain themselves in the near future? So that's basically about it. That was just a very, very high level, analysis of what we're going to be focusing on, but that's sort of the inspiration of what we're going to be working on in this case. But do you guys have any questions about the case, what the plan is going to look like for the next few weeks? I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but the case is going to run for the next 4 weeks, starting this week. So I guess, another 3 weeks, sorry. So otherwise, we are going to have workshops starting next Tuesday with the first technical workshop. There will be some exercises in between workshops for you guys to work on and prepare yourselves for the subsequent workshops. That being said, these office hour timings within your chapters are really a good place to interact with other people, ask questions, and learn a little bit more about data analytics. Each office hour meeting is going to have some sort of content that they're going to teach. It's going to be very high level content, but it is the foundation, building blocks of what you are going to need for the case 2 projects. The case 2 projects are going to start. We're going to start opening signups starting next week, and we're going to lay out what the project expectations are going to look like for the end of this case. Otherwise, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, so the doc to all the cases that we will tackle for this year is available on the public drive. I think I made a tiny URL for it. I can send that across in the email along with all the resources, along with the resources that will be provided for your workshop homework or whatever. What will be happening this week at the office hours? We will be bringing that up shortly. We're still trying to decide what are the most important concepts to teach, but we will be providing the content very soon. Yeah. Why the restaurant industry? That's a really good question. So we've specifically taken the restaurant industry simply because it is the most affected industry at this point in time. Honestly, if you would have pictured a restaurant 6 months ago or even 8 months ago, you would have pictured walking into, a very common space with other people, possibly a very crowded place, and sharing some food together. Now, like walking into a restaurant is almost like a taboo. People, feel sort of scared about walking into this restaurant, and that's really affecting the livelihoods of these restaurant owners, people in the food and hospitality. Yeah, exactly. A food and hospitality sector. It's one of the industries that's been affected, and one of the industries that has been changed the most as a result of the pandemic. So we really want to focus on it. There's a lot of different trends that are available, and we feel that you guys will have the best shot of understanding what data analytics is like by using the restaurant industry as a foundation. How might we be helping them? So to answer your question, in terms of how we will be helping the restaurant industry, it's very hard to specifically help them at this point in time. We will be getting to that later on in the program for sure. But right now, what we're trying to do is determine, what foundational skills you guys will need to be successful for the program. But to answer your question very directly, Lawrence, it will be essentially to understand what are these trends. So understanding what the problem is like, and then crafting a solution at a future point in time. But for now, it's just understanding the problem, understanding what's happening, how's consumer behavior changing, and we want to understand those trends before we craft a solution. But that is where we're going to be leading towards in the future. Awesome. Does anyone have any other question? Yeah, and for those of you that have just joined recently, please join the Discord. The link can be found at techunder20.com at the very bottom. I'll post the link in the chat. Please feel free to access it, take a look. We do have a lot of people applying. Will we be applying data scraping again like the last time? So with regards to web scraping, we are still trying to figure out what are the key skills we want to focus on. In this case, we're really focusing on data analytics. So I'm not sure if there will be a specific web scraping component, although it would be really cool to see if we can integrate that. Because of the short amount of time that we have in each case, we definitely want to be focusing on those core competency skills. But there will for sure be a Python component involved in this specific challenge. Exactly. Yeah, and that's very true. There will be a data set that is going to be provided from using Kaggle, if I'm not mistaken, and is using a Yelp data set, which has a bunch of data points. Timur, if you're here, would you like to chat about it a little bit?
Sure, I can speak about it on a pretty high level, but essentially it's a huge data set. It was last updated in March, ironically, right before the pandemic hit. So essentially it has review data, business data, and user data. And we're going to try to figure out what happened. It's a bunch of restaurants that we're going to be looking at.
Yep. But yeah, before we get into these slightly more technical concepts like data sets and data structuring or whatever, we will be providing some warm-up videos that for you guys to watch during the week and have an exercise for you to complete during those office hour meetings. So those warm-up videos will be coming out shortly by the end of tonight. And then, yeah, that's about it from our side. Awesome. So if there are any other questions? Going once, going twice. Awesome. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to message us on Discord. And yeah, thanks for joining us today, and see you guys next Tuesday, sorry, at 5:30 p.m. Take care, everyone. See you soon.